Been moved by Counselor Runyon and seconded by Counselor McLaughlin to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Presentations or proclamations. 5A is a Provider Appreciation Day proclamation. And because of her involvement with this issue, I've asked Counselor Long to please read the proclamation for Provider Appreciation Day.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City of the Dalles Proclamation, May 6, 2022, Provider Appreciation Day. Whereas Child Care Aware of America and other organizations nationwide are recognizing child care providers on this day. And whereas over half the children under the age of 6 nationwide are estimated to spend some time in non-parental care arrangement on a weekly basis, which provides critical enrichment opportunities and nurtures development for children of all backgrounds and is a vital building block of our state economy. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has created tremendous hardship for childcare providers and the families of Oregon who depend on them, who have continued to meet the needs of families while risking their health and financial stability to remain open. And whereas Oregon recognizes these hardships and has provided much needed relief to providers to help sustain the viability of childcare by providing free personal protective equipment and allowing providers to be paid through the employment-related daycare program when providing childcare while children are engaged in distance learning. And whereas our future depends on the quality of the early childhood experiences provided to young children today, support for high-quality childcare represents a worthy commitment to our children's future. Now, therefore, Richard A. Mays, Mayor of the Dalles, Oregon, hereby proclaims May 6, 2022 as Provider Appreciation Day in the Dalles and urges all citizens to recognize childcare providers for their important work.
Thank you, Counselor. With that, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Item 5B is the Dalles Beautification Committee is here for an update. And I believe the committee is all lined up in the first row. I'm sure they'll be properly introduced by the chair, Ms. Tiffany Prince.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members for having us. I will introduce everyone. Here to my right, we have Debbie Ferrer. She'll be manning our slides. Behind me, I have Bill Lennox, Adam Romlow, John Nelson, Connie Krumrich, and not present, she's our newest member, is Kelsey Alsheimer. So I'm going to give Debbie a second to load up the presentation. Okay, cool.
We have a hard copy.
Yeah, that is an additional supplemental. In addition to the presentation, you did get provided some documents. So today I'm just here to introduce and then hand it off to the rest of my committee, but we're going to be speaking about our budget request. I want to, point out that it is a larger request than we've had in the past, and we will be sharing why. The past 2 years, we've received about $10,000 as, and you'll see through what I'm going to share, the accomplishments that we've been able to do with that $10,000. And so after being a committee for a couple of years, we really have our sights set on some things and some things that will really help beautify, we think, the city, recommendations, things that we're advocating for. So even though I'm sharing our past accomplishments, we really have a focus for the future as my committee members will be sharing. All right, great. So some of the things that we have is our beautification award. We give this out to homeowners April through October, and a holiday award for the month of December. And we get great feedback. It's open to the community to submit houses. Here's our most recent winner. And another large accomplishment that we've had, which went well beyond our budget, but we had coordinated and worked with the Lions and the Parks District to revitalize and rework and this whole Rose Garden area and Vote Fountain up at Cirrhosis Park. We got rid of that red rock and new lions. The fountain does run. And pavers, as you can see, it really just shines on up there. It was truly a great accomplishment. We also have our Stop the Drop campaign, which is an anti-littering campaign. And there's several different like areas to this. The main one that we're really focusing on, because COVID kind of like cut most of what we were doing with that project. So the main one is our second Saturday cleanups, and Columbia Gorge Toyota and Honda is a huge sponsor of that. Like they really have just coordinated with us and, you know, haul off the trash and help us in so many different capacities. As you can see here, busy streets, and our advertisements are in both English and Spanish. Another is our wind sculptures. We have here on this street is the Kelly Triangles, it's famously called. It's by La Michoacana. And this was a big hit. It like, they barely went up and it was all over like social media and stuff. And so we were like, well, that was great. Let's do another set. So as you can see on the next slide, we have some incoming sculptures that will be coming in for areas like the dock, Trevitt, and the other kind of triangle by the Thai place like Montaires. So, and then other beautification areas that around town, we have on my left, the clock that was not working. It is now working, keeps time. And to my right is the historic downtown sign. At night, you couldn't see it. So we have lights put up in there. You know, we've worked with Public Works and getting a lot of these projects done. And another thing I just want to highlight that is in your budget, what that came through City Council. And it's separate outside of our budget request is the welcome signs. So we want to just thank you for hearing our request for that at the last presentation that I gave to you all. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bill Lennox, and I would like to speak to you about our new priority, a new priority that's been on my mind ever since I came into the committee many years ago, and it's been a couple of years at least. And it's to speak to you about trees for a minute. And I want to just take you back and have you just relax a little bit and just imagine, since have you ever thought about the giants among us standing on the corners along parking strips or even shading us at the library? When we take the time, we marvel and appreciate their individual grandeur, absorbing a sense of strength, security, and well-being of the community that had the foresight to plant trees that we now appreciate. Our city forefathers had it right about planting large shade trees years ago. Many of them arrived in the Dalles from the East Coast and other locations and knew from their past experience of the importance of trees in the community, especially in our semi-arid climate. They planted trees along our main streets, in neighborhoods, parking strips, choosing a well-known species at the time, the sycamore. A prime example is the tree at the library where the bears hang out. Large sycamores and other large shade trees were planted throughout the city. Some of these trees can still be seen specifically in the 400 block of East 8th. Do you have that? And other side streets. These large trees once lined 8th Street, 4th Street, 12th Street, and for many blocks, but were removed. This is a picture of 8th Street, where at one time this particular street was lined with large sycamores, but they were in fact removed. And while we understand that some of these trees cause damage to sidewalks, we all know of past accommodations made by the city to prevent removal, like the giant elm located near 4th and Lincoln Street. This was an incredible save, I think, at one time. There are many varieties which could provide the canopy so well needed in this community. I'm using the sycamore variety only as an example of what could come with a program that changes the way we think and understand about the importance of trees by encouraging a citywide plan for owners to keep their trees. Really important here, because so many times we see beautiful trees being decimated, and it's just because they have become a nuisance. To keep their trees when possible and to plant new ones. We, the Beautification Committee, really encourage the city to hire an individual to develop a program as modeled by our other communities, as other communities have done. This person would work with all stakeholders to develop a plan so that there would be more consistency of agencies. I know Urban Renewal, Parks and Rec, Main Street, the Dalles Chamber, City Public Works, along with ODOT and others, have interest in developing a comprehensive plan. The city has most recently supported a climate change committee, which also supports a tree management program. Our tree canopy is really critical for economic development and all the myriad of benefits as outlined in a wonderful link in front of you, which I believe is the argument for large shade trees. This is a very concise pamphlet. It really gives you a good argument of why shade trees are so critically important for communities. Our city will soon lose, and this is an important thought, our city will soon lose the majestic trees we now have. The beautiful isolated sycamores that you see periodically, the one on the state or on the state parking lot down here on 4th Street, those trees aren't going to last forever. And so our recommendation is the city really work on developing and putting energy, planting the seed, literally tree seeds and others, to be able to develop a program that we think that would be help the city, not only now, but into the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, council, for hearing us out. My name's Adam. I guess I drew the long straw because I get to talk about the economic impact of trees, which are pretty significant. Just as a source of income, and the rate of return here you see quoted is more a factor of deferred maintenance, right? But that was one of the issues with the sycamore was they all had to be taken out. They were tearing up the sidewalks, and so a proper tree program really can help save the money, and it's a good use of resources for a couple of reasons I'm going to go through. It increases property values across the city, downtown. It also reduces energy bills, especially in a place like the Dalles with that sun in the summer. I mean, it gets pretty hot, so some good shade is a benefit from an energy conservation perspective, but it's also great in communities. It does empower or give the community a sense of empowerment, healthier patterns of child play in the neighborhoods. And I think anybody driving around can kind of see that, when they drive through a neighborhood with trees, and well-marked sidewalks and safety as well. But it encourages better play among our youth, which is really important. It's more value for neighborhood common spaces and people gathering, fewer incivilities. It reduces property crimes and violent crimes, reduces driver aggression. This comes back to that stress relief effect that trees have on people and just greenery has and shade has on people. So stress recovery as well, hard to quantify, but definitely we all feel it. So downtown too, people pay more for commodities in places with trees. They'll spend more time there. It reduces noise. It can reduce the wind as well. And also just provide that space, I think, that a lot of us on the beautification committee have really tried to cultivate, which is a space for people to enjoy downtown. And shade and some windbreak is really a critical component of that here. So it also reduces the temperature in these heat islands, right? But nobody wants to sit on these benches we're going to talk about when it's like 105 degrees and there's no shade. So we're I think everybody on the committee, but also the partners we've talked about as well. And I just like to compliment the committee here. They work really hard. A lot of these folks have been on here for a few years, and they've been putting in a lot of work to kind of identify a big project. And we looked at doing this ourselves, but it's just kind of beyond the scope, I think, to do it right. And that investment, we think, would be a really great addition to the community. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the climate concern as well.
Okay, I'm Debbie Ferrer, and I'm going to say a few things about the environmental benefits of urban trees. So as Adam mentioned, I'm just going to finish off with that. Urban areas are typically about 1 or 2 degrees hotter than the surrounding rural areas, but they can be as high as 10 degrees hotter under certain conditions when there's a lot of pavement and so on. And trees help reduce urban temperatures by as much as 10 degrees by creating shade, reducing the amount of radiation that's reflected off of paved surfaces, and by humidifying the air. This is the old science teacher talking here. This can also help reduce the amount of energy that buildings in the area use on hot days. Trees also decrease runoff on the unpaved areas in the sidewalk where trees are planted. Helps soak water into the soil, and the leaves of trees actually slow the raindrops down. So that means less water ends up in storm drains. Trees take in and use carbon dioxide, of course, to create the molecules that make up the tree. And an average tree can store hundreds of pounds of carbon dioxide during its lifetime, which helps remove this greenhouse gas from the atmosphere. And finally, as we have a downtown that has literally hundreds of cars, I don't know, maybe even thousands of cars going through it every day, trees also can remove particulate matter, pollutant particulate matter from the air. So they can actually help filter this particulate pollution. And some trees, like the silver birch, the yew, and the elder trees, can reduce particulate pollution by as much as 70%. I'm going to turn it over to John.
Hi, I'm John Nelson. And I'm going to kind of wrap up the shade tree conversation and talk to you a little bit about our second priority. The planting of shade trees in the downtown area as proposed for the city for this year's city budget is our #1 priority. A recommended amount of $20,000 has been proposed for this year, an amount that is important as a beginning investment. If you think that is as high a priority as we do, then you'll approve that recommendation. Our second priority is to include downtown furniture. This proposal did not make it into this year's proposed budget. We are recommending $28,000 to $30,000. It's our understanding that the Urban Renewal Agency funded the inclusion of trash containers in their first street improvement plans, but benches were not included or planned for. We would like to see both those items, downtown furniture, and be included in the plan. It is this committee's opinion that we need more benches, more trash cans, and containers for plant material, such as flowers, through our downtown core area. The design, selection, and maintenance of these items needs to be coordinated so that we have a unified look or theme, and it's noticeable throughout the downtown. The existing furniture on 2nd Street and 3rd Street is not resilient. It needs a lot of continued maintenance. We need to select more furniture which is resilient and sustainable and of good design. The efforts to accomplish this in the future need to be continued, need to be coordinated, and well-funded. The cost of benches ranges from several $100s to over $1,000 per item. The Beautification Committee recommends that the city, urban renewal, and Main Street coordinate these efforts by creating a design team to make decisions about number, style, and placement of benches, trash cans, and planters for flowers and other plant material throughout the downtown area, and to include a beautification committee member on the team. Creating a more beautiful community ultimately pays for itself in higher property values, increased economic activity, and our own personal health and well-being. Thank you for letting me speak. And next would be Connie.
I'd like to say a bit more about the third type of furniture, planters. From its start in the summer of 2019, the Beautification Committee has desired to see container plantings throughout our town, convinced that in addition to healthy trees, there's nothing more transformative in a city than colorful containers filled with well-cared for plants. As mentioned by John, we are recommending the formation of a design team that we would love to be part of. This would be, the work of the team would be a multi-phase, multi-year project. So members of the committee would go to visit other towns and come back, and numerous times we would have the conversation about how much we would admire hanging baskets and planting containers in the towns that we visited. And inevitably, the question would be raised, why couldn't we have that in our town? And we believe we can. It requires a commitment on the part of the city to care for and maintain the planters. And we believe that the city is understaffed in the area of maintenance and recommends enlisting the services of additional staff or an independent company. In addition to caring for trees and plantings, there are other tasks in need of more attention. These would include weeding of tree grates, weeding sidewalks, weeding other city properties, cleaning sidewalks, litter removal, and the cleaning of restrooms. Increased staffing will enhance livability, economic development, and environmental improvements. The Beautification Committee members cherish our city and see it as being like an unpolished diamond. And we want to make and help make the Dalles shine. And it feels to us that just like before COVID, there's a real bubbling occurring in the Dalles. New businesses are popping up, First Fridays, cruise ships, the murals, our history, natural wonders, recreational opportunities are bound to bring more and more visitors to our town. And technology is allowing people to live wherever they want and work remotely, which is going to grow the number of our residents. We love our city and see great potential in it. And we're committed to reaching the goals stated in our Beautification Committee mission statement. Add to the rich cultural history of our place, share the beauty of our community, and instill a sense of pride in our public, private, and communal outdoor spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the committee? I have one. Has anybody contacted Main Street or the Chamber or Urban Renewal about this so-called design team or coordinating and working together?
We do coordinate and work with all of those entities. We have through Izetta, who is our staff liaison. She invites them to meetings. As far as the design committee, no, we have not gone that far yet. I think we're waiting to see what kind of shakes out through budget process before we spearhead on that.
That'll be on May the 2nd, which is a week from tonight.
We will be there. Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else?
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah,
Great
Councilor
teamwork. That was excellent amount of handing off and coordinating. So kudos to the committee. Also inspiring and intriguing thoughts, and obviously a lot of homework. So thanks on both points.
We appreciate your time.
Yeah, great work, you guys, and not only for your future endeavors, but also for what you've accomplished in the past. You guys have done a heck of a lot with very minimal resources financially. So thanks very much for coming tonight. Okay, item 6 is audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. Up to 5 minutes per person will be allowed. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions with the understanding that the city can either answer the question tonight or refer that question to the appropriate staff member who will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to the city council for up to 5 minutes on any subject which is not later appear on the agenda? Or is there anybody on Zoom who would like to speak? Okay, last call. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you. Item 7 is the city manager's report. Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. It's a bit loud. First off, I believe COVID was in full uproar when our Assistant Public Works Director, Eric Hansen, started. So I asked Dave, coordinated with me actually, to have him come to this meeting so you could all put a name to a face and Eric could introduce himself or have me introduce him. Go ahead and stand. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and Council, name is Eric Hansen. Came to the city a little over 2 years ago, right before COVID hit. Was in my position for a couple of weeks and was told to go home. So I'm happy hopefully this is over and glad to see all of you in person.
Thank you. Welcome aboard.
Thanks, Eric. Next thing is I had emailed last week at the end of the week on a couple of potential new hires. The library applicant or candidate that was for a part-time library page actually withdrew, so that's no longer under consideration. I would like council's authorization to hire a wastewater collection certified operator. He's completed everything in the background, I believe, except for his pre-employment drug test. Once that gets put in place, then he passes that, fine. Then we'll go ahead and offer him the position, provided council agrees.
Looking for a motion?
Just out of curiosity, since we don't know anything about the person or the position, like why are you coming to council? I mean, is it an HR decision? Usually we've already funded the position, correct?
Correct. And it's under the rules for city manager pro tem that I have to get your approval in order to hire anyone. You may remember last time we went through this, I got your approval to fill all the vacancies at the police department, which we're still doing.
Right.
That did not include other vacancies. And so that's why I'm asking for your approval to hire this person.
Okay.
It's just limitations placed on the pro tem.
I guess it makes sense, but it's like a rubber stamp because I don't know anything.
Well, I'll tell you, we received, I believe it was 4 applications, held interviews, and had 2 vacancies, filled 1 vacancy. 1 person didn't pass the background. So we've got 1 vacancy left and a limited pool to do it with. This is not someone that's got experience in public works or wastewater collection. It's someone who basically met the minimum qualifications.
I'll like stop you there because council does policy, we don't do.
Right.
So I was just kind of trying to figure out what exactly
it's-
it is that you're asking from us. So it's because you're pro tem.
Correct.
So it's kind of a special
Correct.
situation. Okay, thank you.
Does the motion have to include the name of the individual and the title?
No.
No.
Sorry. Thank you.
So you don't need a motion to approve.
No, just a consent would be work fine.
Oh, you don't need a motion at all.
No.
Just, anybody got a problem with Daniel hiring or Daniel authorizing the hiring of this? Anybody?
What was the position again?
Wastewater collection certified operator.
Please do.
Yeah.
Okay, you got it.
Okay. And then the last thing is 6 months ago, city council appointed me as city manager pro tem. The language in the city charter limits that to 6 months. Unfortunately, it doesn't specify really how that 6 months is applied. My reading of it, and I've conferred with the city attorney, is it's 6 months from appointment. That ends this evening. And so following this evening's meeting, the city is ostensibly without a city manager unless council makes another determination. We had hoped to bring this to you previously, but it would have muddied the waters for Julie's last meeting. So the real quandary for me is, how does the city continue to function in areas where the city manager is responsible? That's not only hiring staff to fill vacancies. I have no interest in creating new positions or terminating employees without council approval. And I don't have any idea that any of that's going to happen in the next few weeks. The issue is beyond today, no one has the authority to either recommend hires or sign contracts or negotiate on the city's behalf. And that leaves us 3 weeks without somebody in that position,
Well, you don't have the authority unless,
unless council makes a determination.
and what specific
Uh,
determination would that be?
So either, well, I guess there really is one thing council could do, and it's not spelled out in charter, and that's to select me as interim city manager rather than pro tem.
Right.
Getting into the weeds a little bit, but pro tem is for a time, so it's while a sitting city manager is not able to serve in that capacity.
So to get-
Interim is between city managers.
So to get around the time commitment or the 6-month time period, we want to authorize you to be the interim as opposed to the pro tem,
Correct.
which has a 6-month deadline on it, which is
Correct.
today.
Correct.
So we're going back to October 25th, 2021 was when you were appointed.
Correct.
Okay. Once again, does that need a motion?
That would need a motion.
Okay. Council Runyon.
Well, the first question is, are you amenable to going forward in that position?
I am.
Okay, there we go.
Some sort of direction there. I just didn't want to do it otherwise.
Okay, we're looking for a motion to appoint Daniel Hunter as the interim city manager.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll go ahead and second it.
It's been moved by Council Runyon and seconded by Council McLaughlin to appoint Daniel Hunter as the interim city manager. Is there any more discussion?
Yes,
Council Runyon.
I would assume that following this meeting or tomorrow, whatever there has to be some kind of negotiation regarding pay scale and so forth. Or is that all spelled out somewhere?
None of that spelled out anywhere. I
I
would,
thought it was.
not for interim, it's not.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just say for the period of pro tem and generally when someone fills a position of their supervisor or manager, we have in our policy what is acting in capacity, that employee receives another 5% in their base pay. And that's what I've been operating on.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that on the table. There's a little paperwork needed, but I'm all for it.
Well, the salary issue needs to be settled, and it seems to me we can either authorize the 5%, which is what we've been doing for pro tem, or you can assign me the task of negotiating with Mr. Hunter if you're not happy with the 5%.
I'm amenable either way.
If that's acceptable to you,
I'm fine with it.
that's an easy fix.
Okay, so it's been moved to appoint Daniel Hunter as interim city manager with an increase in pay of 5% above his present salary.
I have a question. And I'm just curious, our attorney didn't say anything and I can't really see his face. So could I ask you to weigh in and just let me know how you're feeling about this discussion we're having here?
Sure. Thanks, Councilor Long. Mr. Mayor, this has been a topic that has been floating internally here at the city for about 2 weeks now, and it's been quite a transition. I think staff has done an excellent job in getting us here. And so this is, in the truest sense of the word, just an extreme formality. Daniel has been serving as pro tem in our former city manager's absence, which she took some time off to deal with family issues. And so Daniel was well versed in the city manager responsibilities and has been for some time. And so I think he sort of bubbled up to be a natural fit to serve in the interim capacity. And so there appears to be some language in the charter indicating a 6-month time period for what's known as a pro tem city manager. And Daniel hit the nail on the head when he said that pro tem typically just means for a time. And so it's sort of in my opinion, just a passive status that applies to a person designated to be the city manager in situations where we have a city manager. They just happen to be unavailable, right, for a day or a couple days or 6 consecutive months. And so I wasn't here when the charter was most recently amended. And so I wasn't involved in that process. If I were to rewrite the charter, which I can't without the consensus of the voters, I might change that language to be explicit in saying this does not apply to interim city managers or something like that, or make a distinction. And so Daniel here tonight, and him and I talked about this a few hours ago. I think is doing everything appropriately and by the book. Again, in the truest sense of the word, quite a formality. So if it's otherwise okay to council, and if you're Daniel, if you're otherwise okay with a 5% raise for the job, I think that would be just fine. In fact, I was going to touch on a different aspect of what Daniel's talking about in my city attorney's report, which is coming up next, which deals with the issue of hiring and firing, just to be extra clear about it. But I didn't say anything because everything was good to me, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Daniel or for Jonathan?
No.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any more discussion?
The motion was amended, so we really need to say the motion was amended to approve and then vote.
Okay, I thought I did that, but
No.
are both people
5%.
okay?
Yes.
Counselor McLaughlin?
Yes.
Counselor? Okay. So once again, it's been moved and seconded to appoint Daniel Hunter, interim city manager, for a pay increase of 5% above the salary. Any more?
I would like to add, we might want to put an end date on that until the commencement of the next city manager's start, which I believe is May 16th. And so if we could amend the motion for the last time to appoint Daniel as interim city manager, subject to that 5% increase through May 16th or until May 16th of 2022.
Would some counselor like to amend the motion? Again,
Until what date?
Just
May
16.
16th.
16.
15th.
Is it the 15th?
You could say
That's
through
the last day.
through
through May
15th.
15th.
Midnight, it's all yours, buddy.
I'll get my first call.
Well,
Is that acceptable?
it's acceptable to amend the motion to include the salary as stipulated to make the term of this office through the 16th, 15th at midnight. And I'm just very thankful that Mr. Hunter is here and able to do the work for us. And I very much appreciate it.
And I will second that again, McLaughlin.
Any more amendments or discussion?
No amendments, Mr. Mayor, but a comment to just say that I appreciate Mr. Hunter's willingness, his patience, perseverance, and service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Next on the agenda is the city attorney's report. Mr. Kara.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. As I mentioned, and as Daniel mentioned, a number of the city's positions are currently open and advertised or in the interview process. And during this interim period between the former city manager's retirement and the new city manager's commencement on May 16th, some of these openings could result in the need to complete the hiring process. Daniel just asked for the council's authorization to hire this wastewater employee. And so typically, and out of an abundance of caution, in reading the charter dealing with this pro tem and interim distinction, I wanted to make it clear to the council. And so Daniel understands the bounds of his authority here for the next month. Because typically temporary city managers or city managers serving in a pro tem capacity lack the independent authority to hire potential or terminate existing employees. In our case here in the city of the Dalles, there does not appear to be a need to authorize Daniel to terminate anyone's employment, which my opinion is should remain a council decision until the new city manager's service begins on May 16th. But since Daniel's currently the city's HR director and is now serving as the interim city manager, my opinion is it's in the city's best interest to authorize him to make those types of hirings as opposed to firings should vacancies arise. And so my advice here and the extent of my report tonight is to advise council to make a motion to temporarily authorize interim city manager Daniel Hunter to finalize city employment hirings for all positions recently open, advertised, in the process of being advertised, or in the interview process until May 16th, 2022. And again, this is a bit more of a formality. But we would like to do everything as prudently as possible and to ensure that Daniel has the tools that he needs to do the job that you all just asked him to do. And so again, I'm happy to read the motion if any counselor so wishes to make it.
Just a quick question. So does this mean he would not have to come back before the council like he just did for the wastewater employee?
Correct.
Okay. Does anybody want Mr. Kara to repeat the motion?
Not necessary. Unless I said it.
He's going to read it for you, right?
Well, you already did. You want him to read it again? Anybody?
Don't worry about it.
Okay, does anybody like to make a motion for what Mr. Kara just said?
I will move to make the motion per City Attorney Kara's suggested draft resolution, or suggested resolution, rather.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Council Richardson and seconded by Council Randall to approve the motion as read by Mr. Kara regarding the interim city manager's authority to hire. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. City Council reports. We'll start with Mr. Councilor Runyon.
Not a lot of things, but it has been busy. The 22nd, as a secretary of a group called Outside the Wire that works on veterans issues and whatnot. Again, I'm not a veteran. I just keep getting asked to be involved in things. But we had an awards night and presented awards to some community leaders in the area that have done over and beyond helping our community recognize veterans and veterans issues. It was well attended, probably around 50 people at the Civic ballroom upstairs. That was on the 22nd. On the 23rd, just kudos to everybody involved in the 41st annual Cherry Festival. It was amazing. And after a couple of years of, almost gone, it was just really good to see people downtown and out and about, and the streets were full from dawn to dark and after dark. So good job. That's it.
Councilor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On April 12th, I attended an Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee meeting on the 14th and the 21st, attended the Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs programs. In between, I had a couple of personal meetings or one-on-one meetings with our outgoing and incoming city managers. On Tuesday, the 19th, attended an Urban Renewal Board meeting. On the 20th, started reading our city budget. Still working on that. This weekend, did a little bit of volunteering with the People's Forge Art Project at Cherry Festival. It was great to see people out and about. And I want to take opportunity, Mr. Mayor, just to give a word of acknowledgement and thanks to the many neighbors in our community who volunteer and make our community a bit better, whether it's serving on a committee or doing work that goes unseen. There are a number of people behind the scenes on everything from the Cherry Festival or the parade, supporting our students, beautifying parks and trails, feeding children who would otherwise go without, and any number of other worthy things. And I appreciate all of my neighbors who give with such heart. And speaking of heart, I want to encourage people to check out the ongoing high school spring musical Spin. Mr. Mayor will say it's only because I am somewhat acquainted with one of the actors in that production. But in fact, there's usually about 10 or 12 youngsters on the stage at any one time, and they're all giving it all their heart, and singing and acting. There's 2 shows left, Thursday and Friday night. And I encourage folks to check that out. It's $10 or $8 for some of you. Well spent. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
That'll cost you.
Is there an age requirement on the $8?
Honored seasoned citizens are $8. And
Seasoned citizens.
if that's too high a hurdle, I know a guy.
You got to be seasoned and. Okay. Council Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
On Friday, April 22nd, I participated in the Gorge College and Career Fair at Columbia Gorge Community College. About 200 high school juniors and seniors were able to tour the campus, the new skills center, learn about the academic programs, and meet with potential employers. They also had opportunities to work on resume writing and interviewing skills. On Saturday, I participated in the Cherry Festival Parade. And this morning I met with the executive director of the Dalles Main Street to discuss their budget request for fiscal year 2022-23. And that's my report.
Thank you. Counselor Long.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 12th, I attended the Urban Renewal Budget Committee meeting. And on the 20th, I attended the Traffic Safety Committee meeting. And it looks like there's going to be some interesting things coming out of there, particularly after budget goes through. But one of the things, we're looking to add some more money to the 50/50 sidewalk repair program again and kind of clarify how that works for people. So if that's something, a lot of people don't realize that they are responsible for repairing the sidewalk in front of their home. And so this is a program that the mayor really advocated for. And we had this last year and we're going to do again to help people pay for that. 50% from the city, 50% from the homeowner. I was ill, so I did miss the Urban Renewal Agency meeting, but we did try to do a meet and greet and just to get to know each other and bond a little bit better. And I participated with some of these other counselors in the Cherry Festival Parade. And that's my report.
Thank you. Counselor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Mace. I attended a community outreach team meeting at the community college for a final briefing on the trip to Washington, D.C., and it was very productive. I was asked to meet with Governor Inslee from the state of Washington as he flew in for it was an observatory at Goldendale that he was flying into, and so I met his family and said hello. Cherry Festival, I did ride in the pickup in the back with fellow counselors and the mayor. And thank you, Mayor Mays, for your efforts in resolving the SIP process. And now we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. As far as my report goes, on the 14th, I met with two ladies from Safe Space, which is an organization that serves several counties in the area, and they're considered the first line responder for children suffering some kind of child abuse. It's a very good organization. And I would recommend that people who aren't familiar with it should become more familiar with it. On the 18th, I attended a memorial service at the St. Vincent de Paul for Mr. John Doyle, who passed away on April 11th. On the 19th, I was on KODL Coffee Break with Al Wynn. On the 21st, I met with David Benko, who's the owner and operator of the NAM Museum, talking about some of his plans for the coming couple of years. And I also attended the meeting of the community outreach team on the 22nd. And Cherry Festival seemed to be a big success. It was my honor to crown Little Miss and Little Mr. Cherry Fest, ages 3 and 4. Quite an experience. And so I did that at the Senior Center on Saturday morning. Jesse and Reagan were the names of the boy and the girl. So that ends my report. Item number, let's see, not 10A. This is authorizing an amendment to the contract for engineering services during construction for the Dog River Pipeline. Mr. Dave Anderson.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of council. Just a year ago tomorrow, we awarded the contract to begin the design work for the Dog River Pipeline. And that work's been completed. The project's currently out to bid. Bids will be open next week. We've got other elements of the project that are moving forward. We have nearly completed the receipt of the pipe required to support the first season of construction. That pipe's to be stored on a parcel on the port. We've got over 10,000 feet of pipe that's showed up so far. We also have out to bid right now a contract for the timber removal services to clear the trees from the corridor, and those bids will be open tomorrow. So fingers crossed on that. The design of the fish screens and passage systems had to be broke out separate from the
rest of the design for the pipeline construction. Just because of the challenges or some of the delays or timelines involved with getting state approvals for the systems to be put in. So they have been broke off separate. That'll be another contract coming to the council in the future for award later this summer. First pipeline, first construction season is scheduled to begin this year, as soon as the snow clears. So at this point, it's time to amend our existing engineering contract with Jacobs Engineering to provide services related to the construction. These will be the inspection services, daily inspection, pretty much continuous presence during the construction activities for the pipeline. Be sure that contract specifications are adhered to, that all the Forest Service requirements are adhered to. We have monitoring that needs to occur in areas near wetlands. We have monitoring that needs to occur in areas that may have a higher probability of having cultural resources discovered. And this is going to be a full-time presence during the construction activities. The request for proposals for the original, for this design contract with Jacobs anticipated that we would be awarding an amendment to that contract for these construction related services. So we're still on track and consistent with the plan that we implemented a year ago. The original design contract, the current one that we're just wrapping up, was issued for just over $1.8 million. That contract, there were 2 amendments issued so far, and that's why this is the 3rd amendment. One was a no-cost contract amendment just to bring the contract into compliance with the federal funding requirements. The other one added about $30,000 to that 1.8 for some additional work that was needed related to wetlands and cultural resources. Of that $1.8 million of the original, we think there's going to be about $125,000 that we don't spend, and that money will carry over as a credit towards this, the work to be done under this amendment. The proposed contract amendment number 3 is for $1,599,552. It will provide for construction, inspection, and monitoring services over 2 construction seasons, 2022 and 2023. Within Fund 53, the Water Reserve Fund, we currently have over $10 million allocated for this project in the current fiscal year. Provision of these services, engineering services during construction, was anticipated when that money was budgeted. We also just received the finalization of an award of an additional $4 million in low interest loan. This is not a new, this is for a total of $8 million. I've talked to you about this $4 million before, so I don't want you to think we've added a third $4 million to it. But that award was finalized last week in a meeting with the Drinking Water Advisory Committee at the state of Oregon. For that, the city staff's recommendation that the city council move to authorize the city manager, interim city manager, to execute amendment number 3 to contract number 2020-009 with Jacobs Engineering Group in amount not to exceed $1,599,552.
Any questions from Mr. Anderson?
How did you arrive at that sum, Dave?
There's a pretty detailed bid schedule that goes along with that. So we've gone through, or Jacobs led the effort in it. All the personnel identified to be needed to provide these services have been costed out. Their hours have been estimated throughout the period of 2 different construction seasons. And so the scope of work that's been negotiated and is supported by the hours in the cost estimate.
Multiple personnel on their end.
There will be multiple personnel because there's a couple of different disciplines. There will be one primary inspector in charge of almost everything that I identified in the report. It'll require a different person with the appropriate certifications to do the monitoring for cultural resources in the high probability areas. That's a different licensure. And there will be some efforts for fish salvage and supervision that will also require a different level or a different type of expertise. So there'll be and then of course there's the overhead of administrative staff and project management staff and things like that associated. So there's several people involved in the construction-related engineering services to be provided.
Thanks.
Any other questions? The fish passage has been delayed, and is that going to delay construction, or can we
No.
proceed with construction?
We'll
Yeah.
proceed with construction of the pipeline. We will wrap up the design and approvals for the fish passage and screening throughout the course of this summer. We expect to advertise that contract later this fall, get it over the winter, have it ready to go for construction in the 2023 season. And construction on the pipeline will continue also in the 2023.
And we're opening bids for that on May 23rd.
I'm sorry.
We're opening bids for the construction of the pipeline itself, May 23rd, so we would.
We're actually opening those bids on May 5th, and we're planning to bring it to the council for award on May 23rd, yes.
Okay, and then assuming everything gets approved, construction would start shortly thereafter.
Shortly thereafter, as soon as the snow clears and the contractors can get into the area.
It's kind of a big deal, isn't it?
Kind of a big deal. It kind of feels like it.
Any other questions? Okay, looking for a motion.
All right, Mayor Mays, I'll go ahead and make the motion to move to authorize the city manager to execute Amendment 3 to contract number 2020-009 with Jacobs Engineering Group in an amount not to exceed $1,599,552, period.
Second by Councilor Runyon.
It's been moved by Council McLaughlin and seconded by Council Runyon to authorize an amendment to the contract for engineering services for the Dog River Pipeline. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
I'll stay for the next report.
Okay.
as well.
Next is item 10B, which is a recommendation for the award of some street crack sealing. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. The city Public Works Department advertised for a 2022 asphalt crack sealing project. This work will provide for crack sealing services by a contractor on about 16 miles of street. 16 miles of street that'll be treated under this contract will be in addition to the estimated 6 miles of street that we'll be doing with our own in-house crews. We're taking a pretty big swing at the crack sealing needs throughout this coming construction season. Crack sealing is a treatment that is rather labor intensive. The materials don't cost a lot, but it goes a long ways towards extending the life of a street if that street's already in a fairly good or fair condition and can be extended by preventing the water getting down into the cracks and further deteriorating that pavement surface. We received 3 bids for the project. The low bid we received was from Pavement Protectors, an amount of $80,612.24. And with that, we had actually budgeted $150,000 for this contract in the street fund, line code 7510. So there are adequate funds available for the project. And with that, it's staff's recommendation that the city council authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Pavement Protectors for the 2022 asphalt crack sealing project, contract number 2022-004, in an amount not to exceed $80,612.24.
Thank you. Any questions? Any discussion? Anybody like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to authorize the city manager to enter into contract with Pavement Protectors for the 2022 asphalt crack sealing project, contract number 2022-004, in an amount not to exceed $80,612.24.
Second?
I'll second that.
Been moved by Council Randall and seconded by Council Richardson to approve the award for the city's street crack sealing program. Any discussion? Where is Pavement Protectors out of? Ben, okay. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Item 10C is a resolution rejecting all bids for a contract for the Wicks Roof Replacement Phase 2 project.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of council. We advertised for the project to construct the Wicks Filter Building Route Project Phase 2. The scope of work for this project would have been to construct a pitch roof over an existing flat roof, which has been experiencing problems, and the membrane system on it has reached the end of its useful life. We've had some problematic roof failures in this system, and a number of years ago felt that a lot better, best long-term solution was to construct a pitch roof over the existing flat roof and get that water and the snow off of the building, rather than having it build up and leak into the building. We completed the first phase of the project, which is very similar in scope, in 2019 for just over $66,000. We had budgeted $75,000 for this phase 2 project. We received only one bid. Actually, for phase 1, we had also only received one bid, and that bid was from this same company. But as I'm sure folks are aware, there have been some very significant increases in metal materials and lumber, and those increases in cost were reflected in a bid which came in at over $144,000, nearly twice what we had budgeted. The bid was otherwise responsive, but just again, it far exceeded what we had budgeted and available for the project. As we discussed just a few weeks ago on another project, the city can reject all bids for a good cause upon the city's finding that it's in the public interest to do so, consistent with our local contract review board rule number 04-0420, paragraph 4. Required findings can be adopted by a resolution. For this report, staff recommending that the city council find that it's in the public interest to reject all the bids due to insufficient funds for the project based upon the one responsive bid received. The attached resolution number 22-017 presented for the council's consideration tonight makes those required findings and would reject all the bids for contract number 2022-008. If the bid for this project is rejected, those funds will just carry over for reallocation in the future to future water system operation. Again, as I mentioned, we had a total of $75,000 budgeted within the water fund, the water treatment budget of the water fund. The lowest responsive bid received was $69,301.80 more than what we had budgeted. And with that, it's the staff's recommendation that the council move to adopt resolution number 22-017, rejecting all bids for contract number 2022-008, the Wicks Filter Building Re-Roof Phase 2 project.
Any questions or discussion from Mr. Anderson?
One question for me, Mr.
Councilor
Mayor.
Richardson.
Dr. Anderson, do you have an idea when you might go back out for bid on this? Roughly.
This all came up after we prepared the 2022-23 budget. So it's not in there. Probably look at it again the year after that.
Thank you.
A quick question. It says the roof is deteriorating and it has historically been problematic. What kind of problems are we facing with this building?
Well, we've been experiencing a lot of leakage. The section, the portions of the building that were covered in phase 1, we were experiencing a lot of leakage there, and we had some ceiling and roof failures that occurred, and that was a building that had a wooden truss system. The section that we're looking at working on now has a membrane, a plastic membrane, like a PVC membrane, that we installed probably 25 years ago, over the top of styrofoam insulation, which we installed at that time to help insulate the building. And that is over a metal flat sheet on metal trusses. So we experience failures. We can continue to patch the membrane, or it leaks. Continue to patch the membrane, and in the intent of avoiding structural damage like we were occurring in the part where we covered with phase one.
That was my next question, but you just answered it. So thank you.
Anybody else? Would anybody like to make a motion?
Okay. I'll move to adopt resolution number 22-017, rejecting all bids for contract number 2022-008, the Wicks Filter Building Re-Roof Phase 2 project.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilor McLaughlin and seconded by Councilor Runyon to reject all bids for the contract for the Wicks roof re-roof replacement project. Is there any discussion, any more discussion or questions?
Yeah.
Councilor Runyon.
In your dissertation, did you talk about what you're going to do temporarily to get us through another year?
Just continue to monitor it and do the type of maintenance on it we've been doing the last few years, which, like I say, if we identify a leak developing, we'll apply a patch to that existing membrane. If we have something that starts to develop more seriously, then I'll be, reviewing what our financial resources are and having a conversation with the finance director to see if we need to move some money around and give up another project and reprioritize this one sooner than a year and a half from now.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more discussion or questions? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. Item 11A is a resolution assessing city properties for the removal of junk and garbage. Mr. Kara.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. So as you mentioned earlier at the start of this meeting, there was no consent agenda tonight. A number of items were pulled and rearranged. And so very commonly what you might find if you do take a look at our consent agendas is a resolution, a template that we adapt and use for the abatement process to assess the costs associated with those types of abatements. And so it's of such a routine nature that the city commonly just handles it by consent, except in cases where the city receives a written objection to the cost of abatement consistent with the timelines that are articulated in the code. In which case, it appears that the practice of the city has been to ask the city attorney to come in and to review the facts and the procedures that were followed to give the council an idea of what has happened. The council can then take a look at the cost of abatement and see if that's fair in their mind, or if they need further information to lower it for whatever the reason is. And one thing I will say though, because I think it does matter, is that it's not a public hearing. In that sometimes, and I know that Councilor McLaughlin will often ask this, if the property owner is present.
Always.
Yeah, and so that appears to be a privilege. It's not spelled out in our code, and so there is no right to speak on these types of issues. I just want to make that clear. But it seems to be a decent thing to ask, especially if they make an effort to come to a meeting and to make their claim. And so if the council so desires, and if the property owners so happen to be here, then the council and only the council has the authority to ask for such a comment. And so in this case, we have two properties, one listed at 415 West 9th, managed by Joseph Issett, and one at 605 West 10th Street, managed by Travis Gaston. The city clerk mailed a notice of the assessment on March 21st, giving a compliance deadline, an objection deadline of March 28th, as spelled out in our code, to provide a written objection to the cost of the assessment. In Mr. Issett's case, the assessment was for $1,700, included a $500 administrative fee. And so the cost that the city actually incurred to spend on the contractor to abate the tree that I described in my staff report and the tree limb is $1,200. As of April 13th, when I wrote this staff report, I was in constant communication with our city codes enforcement officer, Nikki Lesich, who I asked to join us here tonight to answer any substantive questions the council may have with respect to any timelines or deadlines or any of the actual substance associated with these abatements. Nikki, I'm going to volunteer her at any time to come up and answer any questions. As of April 13th, when I wrote this, Nikki indicated to me that she had not received any contact from Mr. Issett on this issue. However, on April 4th, we have records here at the city indicating that Mr. Issett called our finance department, spoke with finance staff, indicated that he had spoken with the city clerk, but after I spoke with the city clerk, she indicated that she had no recollection of ever speaking to Mr. Issett, and we certainly didn't have a record of any communications. In addition to communicating with the finance department, he requested, and through that communication, he requested an extension of the assessment, wanted to make sure that we knew that he did not ask for the abatement, explained that he believed the city mailed notice to the wrong address, and finally that he would be speaking with his attorney. I mentioned it here because I think it's important for the council to know that previous councils that adopted this general ordinance, this nuisance ordinance, thought ahead, and they wrote, when they adopted it, it makes it clear in the code that a failure to receive the notice, so long as it's sent appropriately, shall not render the assessment void, but instead that it shall remain a valid lien against the property. And so, according to the city's records, we certified, mailed, postage, prepaid the notice of assessment to Mr. Issett's address pursuant to the address listed for Wasco County Real Property Records. That's the address database that's explained in our code that the city should be using for all certified mailings. And we, in fact, did receive notice that he had received the notice on April 4th, the same day that he called the finance department. And so with respect to Mr. Issett, my opinion is that the city followed all protocols listed in our code when we abated the property for this tree limb and dead tree. And so he had a deadline of, I believe it was March 28th, to file a written objection with the city clerk. The city clerk has no record of receiving a written objection. Instead, the city does have a record that he called the finance department on April 4th, which is over a week later, and didn't contest the cost, simply asked for an extension and that he didn't ask for it, that we sent it to the wrong person and that he would be speaking with his lawyer. And so I'm happy to stop there to answer any questions or maybe direct any questions to Nikki, or I'm happy to finish my staff report with my understanding of what occurred with Mr. Gaston's property.
Why don't you go ahead with Mr. Gaston and then we'll open it up.
Okay. The second property, as I mentioned earlier, is the property listed 605 West 10th, managed by Mr. Travis Gaston. His property was abated on February 24th, and the actual cost incurred by the city here was $1,475, including a $500 administrative fee. And I have some of the specifics listed here, indicating a history of noncompliance with this parcel, and that the city regularly receives complaints. And again, the codes enforcement officer who's here tonight can answer any substantive questions. In this case, Mr. Gaston actually did file a written objection with the city clerk on the day of the deadline. And so I attached his objection, and I hope to make it part of this agenda staff report as an attachment. I trust that you can all see it listed on page, I believe, 20 of 35. It's an email sent on Monday, March 28th to the city clerk, objecting to the cost of the assessment. And so in Mr. Gaston's case, since he followed the timelines articulated in the notice and in our code, my opinion is the council should evaluate his written objection and take that into consideration before determining the final cost. But otherwise, my opinion is the same. The city followed all the protocols in our code. It's my understanding that the city gave extremely long notices here and solicited voluntary compliance on a number of occasions in both instances. For Mr. Gaston's property abatement, the city actually paid $925 to its contractor to abate the junk. And as I mentioned earlier, both abatement assessments would include this $500 administrative cost, which is built into the code. And again, which is thankfully by previous city councils who enacted this general ordinance, and which cost is to compensate the city for the city clerk's time, the codes enforcement officer's time, and the city attorney's time spent on assessment and abatement of these properties. And so with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions, but ultimately my recommendation is going to be the council moves to adopt this resolution as presented using the motion language drafted in the report.
Okay, before we get to questions, is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the city council about this issue? Okay, Mr. Issett, I'll give you 3 minutes, okay?
Thank you, I appreciate that. This property is a rental. I purchased it in 2016. It's been a rental the entire time. And I use Cherry City Properties as a property manager. Carmen from Cherry City Properties notified me on September 21st that they had received a notice about an issue with just an noxious like branches or something with a bush that was growing out into the sidewalk. And then also that a limb had fallen out of the cottonwood tree. So I asked what the deadline was. I was out of state at the time and I was getting back October 5th, which was a day after the day it was supposed to be done. So I went over there like first thing when I got back, and there was a limb and branch and some pieces of bark on the ground. I picked those up and took them away, and I thought it was done. And then there was another, like, it was like, oh, that wasn't it. There's something else. So I got this whole thing, and then I got a quote from Cherry City Properties from Columbia Tree Service for $450 for the abatement. And it was like cutting some more limbs back. And it wasn't about the money. For this property specifically, its convenience is my biggest motivation. And I was like, I don't mind too much. And also, I did not say that it was mailed to the incorrect address. What I expressed was that the address on file is no longer where it was. I needed to change it. I wasn't blaming anybody else for that. That's my bad. I get that. However, it is a property, it's under property management. I don't think about this property very often. So when I got the notice again that it was going to be cut down, which I'd never heard anything up until I called Nikki, which I do not have record of what day that was. I called Nikki and I said, hey, I thought this was about some limbs. I'm fine with limbs being removed and with paying for that. I don't want the tree to be cut down. The sidewalk was poured around the tree. It's a massive tree. It's on the south side of the house. It adds a lot of value. And just like earlier in the meeting, they're talking about trees in the city. It surprised me and shocked me that they'd want to cut the tree down. So then I called and I said, hey, I didn't realize you were actually talking about cutting down the tree. How do I stop this? I do not want this tree cut down. She said, there's nothing you can do. The tree will be cut down. And, you know, that's just how it works. So when I called on April 4th, that's when I actually picked up that piece of mail. I called 5 minutes after I picked up that certified letter at the post office in Dufur, which I don't live in Dufur anymore. I live here in the Dalles. And that's when I asked, like, hey, I would really appreciate if I could at least talk to somebody about this, because number one, the dollar amount I had from Columbia's trees was $450, and I have that bid here, and it was for picking up limbs and trimming back bushes. And then somehow, and I was not like pursuing this or looking into it, I just thought that's what they were going to charge me for. I found out they're going to cut the tree down when I called Nikki, and she said, there's nothing you can do about it. We've determined that the tree is dead, it was a cottonwood. And I think there's a lot of, I don't know, I just felt like I had no choices. And then when I came back with the price, that just seemed really just out of the ballpark. I would also like to
think you could wrap this up the next 30 seconds?
Yes, I would also like to say I don't know where the thing about me, I'm going to talk to my attorney, came from. I do not remember saying that. I take responsibility for my conversations. I'm not trying to, anything like that. But yes, that's my case right there.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Ms. Lesich if she would come forward, just in case there's any questions for her. Okay. Any questions for the staff, for Mr. Kara or Ms. Lesich on either one of these issues, the ISIC or the Gaston assessments?
I'm just a little bit confused about the dates. It says they were notified on the 28th of March, the notice of assessment, but then it also refers to April 4th as the notice of assessment.
Mr. Mayor and Councilor Randall, it's my understanding the notice of assessment was mailed by the city clerk and dated March 21st, giving a deadline to object pursuant to the code on March 28th, 5 business days. And so that was the notice that this property had been abated and that this was our assessment as a city. This is what it costs the city to abate this property. And so that was what was delivered and well, that was what was sent on March 21st, giving a 5-day deadline and timeline to file any objections to that assessment cost. But in fact, the properties, well, these are different properties, and so they were notified on different dates. The dates of notification of the actual posting of the nuisance is listed in the resolution, and the codes enforcement officer has a very extensive detailed timeline, but it's my understanding, and we spoke quite a bit about this on April 13th when I drafted this report and resolution, that the property address 415 West 9th Street, the property for Mr. Issett was posted initially on September 20th, which was quite some time ago. And the property address 605 West 10th Street, Mr. Gaston, was noticed and posted for nuisance on January 24th, 2022. Again, about 4 months ago. Does that answer your question?
No, not really. I guess what I'm going for is this. Each property owner had until March 28th to file a written objection to the assessment. Then it says they didn't receive, or they received the assessment on April 4th. Notice the receipt of the assessment on April 4th.
That's right. So with certified mailings, part of the reason the city uses them is because they're very reliable. And so when the post office says that it'll be there, on this date, we can confirm that whenever the person actually received it is the date that they signed it. And so the post office would have it delivered the day after the city clerk issued the notice itself on March 21st. And so both of these owners should have received it on March 22nd. That is what our code indicates. And Mr. Issett did not receive or did not sign his receipt of it until April 4th.
Okay.
For reasons I'm not too sure why. I would like to say if Wasco County real property tax records are not accurate, Mr. Issett, I recommend you contact the assessor's office to update your address so the city can timely mail you anything in a timely way. But other than reaching out to the assessor's office, which is what the city commonly does to find an addressee's mailing address, the city did everything by the book.
Any other questions? I just have, it's more of an observation, I believe. Mr. Gaston thinks that the $1,475 is outrageous because it took code enforcement only an hour to get it cleaned. But that doesn't take into consideration the fact that $500 of that is an administrative fee. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's
accurate.
$975 in actual cost.
Yeah, Ms. Lester.
But also, I mean, it's an hour, but they had a team there. So we're talking about man hours, you're talking closer to 4 to 4.5 hours of man hour time. So if one person was actually there, it would have been a half a day.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Councilor Richardson.
Thank you. Good evening, Nikki. Thanks for being here. I have 2 questions. One for each case, each abatement. With regard to Mr. Issett, if I follow him, his case is that essentially there were some miscommunications or clouded communications that hindered its ability to be reactive in a timely manner. Does that strike you as accurate or feasible? I mean, is that a reasonable interpretation of events or not?
Are you talking about what Mr. Issett
Yes.
talked about?
Yeah.
Communication has been difficult with Mr. Issett. many messages, multiple messages, what I documented in my case notes of trying to connect with him and to urge him to call me specifically during the few days before the abatement started. Also, as he stated, Mr. Izzett stated that the Cherry City Property Management, they did contact me and stated that they were having a difficult time getting a hold of him as well, and he was not returning their calls. So I not only reached out specifically and accurately by our codes, I went farther to work with the property management, who also confirmed that they were not getting a response from Mr. Izzett. So there really was no communication other than the one short conversation that I had with him, what was already past tense as far as it in motion for abatement. Do want to know that the tree was not healthy. We do have an arborist report that states that. It was also confirmed by Public Works by coming out and stating that yes, the tree is completely dead, and confirmed by an arborist with Columbia Tree Service. Also, while Public Works was out there, the tree to the east was also noted as dead, dying, and decayed as well. And that I worked with that property owner to get that removed, and he was in full compliance and worked with the codes office.
Thank you. With regard to Mr. Gaston's case, in the staff report provided, said the property has a history of non-compliance. Can you clarify, is the property itself historically problematic or non-compliant, or are we talking about the same person?
We're talking the same person, Mr. Gaston's property?
Yeah.
It is the same person, same property owner.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the staff? Would anybody like to make a motion?
Make a motion. I'll move to adopt resolution number 22-011, a resolution assessing the city's abatement of the real properties located at 415 West 9th Street and 605 West 10th Street.
Thank you, Councilor Long. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
It's been moved by Councilor Long and seconded by Councilor Richardson to approve a resolution assessing 2 city properties for the removal of junk and garbage. Is there any more discussion or questions for the staff? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 11B is a resolution adjusting the minimum employment level requirement for Powder Pure. With us tonight is the city and county's enterprise zone staff manager, Cleaves, Mr. Cleaves.
Nice job. Good evening, honorable mayor and members of council. My name is Matthew Cleaves, and I'm currently the Administrative Services Director at Wasco County, as well as one of your enterprise zone managers under the current enterprise zone, along with Carrie Pipinich from the Mid-Columbia Economic Development District. The topic we have tonight is under the previous enterprise zone that was formally established. They last for 10-year periods of time. And if the council is not familiar, or anybody in the audience is not familiar, the Enterprise Zone Program is a tax abatement program that was sponsored by the City of the Dalles and Wasco County to provide an incentive for manufacturing or business-to-business type enterprises, as well as hotels within our community. There are 3 different levels of abatement or time periods of abatement that are allowed under this zone. The initial is a standard enterprise zone option, which is 3 years. There's an extended option for a 4th or 5th year. And then the long-term option, which is 7 to 15 years that we're mainly familiar with the Google Enterprise Zone agreements that we currently have. And so tonight we have an existing agreement under the Dalles-Wasco County Enterprise Zone with Powder Pure, which is one of the businesses that we have down in the port area. And some of the council may be familiar with this issue as it came up last year. House Bill 2343 allows the sponsors of the enterprise zone to temporarily change or reduce the minimum number of employees that a applicant is required to have under an enterprise zone agreement to continue to be eligible and receive that abatement. Last year, the council and the Wasco County Commission passed a resolution temporarily adjusting the minimum number of employees that Powder Pier would need to have to retain and receive the abatement to 50. And we are seeking another resolution for this coming year. And so much of the information that we have in the staff memo is similar from last year. But we do have William Parkey, who's on the call with us virtually today, who has a short presentation for us to inform you of the continued challenges that they've been having with maintaining and attracting employees and how the COVID-19 pandemic has continued to affect them. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Parkey, and then we'll take it back to close out the memo.
We're waiting for the city clerk to unmute Mr. Parkey, and there we go.
Perfect. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'd like to share my screen. I think you all have a copy of the presentation on paper form. I'll share it virtually as well. All right. We're here to seek another extension of the reduction of income, or not income, but employment level to keep us within good standing for our enterprise zone agreement with the, I think the state passed a option allowing us to do this, recognizing the difficulties we've had across the state with employment levels, both maintaining and attracting new employees. For the year of 2021, it's very reflective of what happened in 2020. Our plant is running at a 28% capacity. The expansion that we use these funds for increased our capacity 50%. To this day, we have not been able to utilize that in an effective way. Our employee headcount is fluctuating in the downward trend, unfortunately. With that, we are increasing our annual salary. In the past year, we've had a 9.3% average salary increase, which is beyond the inflation rate. We have not been fully staffed. We've had open headcounts every month and every quarter. We've had to outsource and create remote positions for some of our open headcount, which has reduced our open headcount number each quarter, because those are now off-site and no longer tied to us, but our parent company. We have a lack of available local labor that's continuing. We've utilized BBSI, medics, several staffing agencies in Portland, recruitment companies. We had a turnover rate that increased from 48% in previous years to 68% in the past 12 months. We've had 34 employees hired. We're kind of, I know the city, the county is all feeling the same issues attracting and retaining employees. Our average production amounts are still below what we were budgeting for or trending for. Most of this is not due just to the orders, but it's the lack of available labor hours to produce within the time frame. And those are the ongoing effects from 2021 to now. Is there any questions for Powder Pure and the reduction in employment resolution?
Councilor Long?
Yeah, so you just commented that it wasn't entirely due to a lack of staffing, that there is some lower demand as well, but you didn't specify how much of that is really staffing issues versus demand issue.
So our budgeted production amount was 40,000. We have the demand to hit that, but we don't have the available labor hours to produce that. Does that make sense? Our capacity utilization is lower, which is at the 28%, but we were not budgeting to be higher than that 50%. So it's utilization versus budgeted.
So are you saying that your sales aren't really down because of COVID, just the employees?
They are not down below a level of expectation. So our forecasting and trends show that we should be around 40,000 kgs produced a month, and we're hovering a little lower at 32,000. And the reason for that is we've had downtime for lack of available labor. We had to suspend a second shift for quite a while just because we didn't have enough bodies to keep the plant running.
Says here that your average salary is $26.44 an hour
Correct.
with benefits.
Full benefits. We offer 401k matching, health, dental, vision. We are a Fortune 100 company, best in class benefits.
Any other questions for Mr. Parkey or for Mr. Cleaves?
So there is a deadline to pass the resolution, which is June 30th of this year. And last week I took this to the county commissioners as a co-sponsor of the enterprise zone who did pass this resolution. And the other kind of unique aspect of the agreement that's taking effect this year is under the agreement, under the total of 5 years that Powder Pier could be eligible to receive abatement. In the 4th and 5th year, we have a community service fee component where in the 4th year, they would pay 50% of the taxes they would normally owe as a community service fee to the sponsors. Then the 5th year, they would pay 75%. And so Powder Pier is at that mark and will be transitioning back onto the tax rolls in full, which was the intent behind the creation of the 4th and 5th year payment. So then it have a, frankly, a rough transition from a full abatement to 100% tax bill. It would be that 50%, 75%, and then full.
So this is a 1-year request for deferral.
The bill that was passed by Oregon allowed for this adjustment last year and this year only. So we passed a resolution last year, and we are looking for essentially the same resolution this year to adjust the minimum employment requirement for Powder Pier to 50 employees.
Do we have any idea what their tax bill is going to be?
I don't have that information with me tonight. That would come through an assessment of the property, which typically takes place around January 1st or after January 1st, I should say. I could certainly see what the county assessor has.
When we originally went into this, we didn't predict COVID, of course. And it seems to me like there are extenuating circumstances, lack of employment. So it seems reasonable to me to, I'm in favor of accepting this proposal.
Nobody else has.
Counselor Long?
Okay, just want to make sure I wasn't talking too much. So last year I was in favor of this and I still am. Last year we talked a little bit about what we might be able to do to assist Powder Pier because they are an asset to our community. And I'm just kind of tossing that out there again. That's the whole point of the enterprise zone is to bring in a business that brings a significant amount of money into the community from elsewhere, is not relying on local purchasing power. And so I don't know what we can do, but as a city, I would like to see us looking into what we can do to help Powder Pier and any other businesses in town to solve this problem as a community.
And to build on your point, Counselor, as part of the agreement, Powder Pier does have a relationship with the employment department and works a first source hiring agreement, as well as I put Mr. Parkey in touch with our local community college.
Yeah, I feel like they have made efforts. Absolutely. I'm just saying,
agree.
I don't know what it is that we need to do, but I'm thinking as a city council, maybe we need a work session or we need I think we need to intentionally figure this out or we're going to lose an asset and it probably is going to be more than just one asset. And that is not good for our city long-term. We fought so hard to bring them here and we've given up a lot in tax abatement. We need to follow this through.
And what I've noticed by the performance of the company, I think they were across the river or they started small and they expanded. And, the property, when you drive by there, it's always immaculate. And it just looks like a first-rate company. And, it's a pleasure to have them in our community. So I would say I'm in favor of doing this just because of the circumstances.
Okay, anybody else? Would anybody like to make a motion?
Let me ask you a question real quick, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind.
No, go
I'm
ahead.
trying to articulate it here. Mr. Parkey, I don't have any heartburn. I'm going to support the motion for this. So no pressure on that end, but I'm curious, do you have any insights on that you could share with us on the employee turnover? Have you done exit interviews or had some kind of communications with folks that might give you insights why we're struggling to keep people in what look like pretty good jobs?
There we go. Yeah, we do perform exit interviews. Obviously, we can't share the individual details. Few of them are for leading indicators that we feel that we have control over. Some recent exit interviews have been literally tied to gas prices. We have several people that commute into our area and into the plant, and they just did the math and said, I can work for less closer to home and not pay the commuting bill. And that's happened multiple times over the past 3 months.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion?
No, he didn't.
Anybody like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to pass resolution number 22-013, a resolution adjusting minimum employment level requirement pursuant to sections 2 and 3 of House Bill 2343 for powder purer.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Council Randall and seconded by Councilor Runyon to approve a resolution adjusting the minimum employment level requirement for powder purer. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Parkey. Good luck. Next is item 11C, was a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement establishing the distribution methodology of community service fees associated with the 2021 Strategic Investment Program Agreement with Google. Once again, Mr. Klebs, who is not only our enterprise zone manager, but our SIP manager, correct?
Kind of. I've been heavily, we don't have a SIP zone per se, but I've been heavily involved in the process here. And I'm quite pleased to be here tonight to kind of bring this home a little bit. I'll start by saying, again, thank you for the time this evening. And I'm going to really focus my comments on the community service fee, the work that we've done related to the community service fee and the included IGA that is in your packet. I am happy to answer any questions or to summarize or recapture the quite long history that it took for us to get here in regards to the SIP agreement itself and its various other components. But in the essence of time, I'll focus on the community service fee itself. And so in March of this year, we had and organized 2 different meetings with all of the taxing districts who assess taxes at the development site of the proposed up to 2 new Google data centers. And the intent behind those 2 meetings was to solicit feedback and input and discuss potential ways to distribute the up to 2 community service fees for each of those projects. As the council may recall, the community service fee is part of the strategic investment program agreement that we have with Google and is based on a formula. The payment is based on as a calculation of 25% of their tax savings for a particular project, capped at 2.5 million each year. And the state of Oregon and Business Oregon has set a process to involve certain taxing districts in deciding how to distribute those fees. And so those meetings, we wanted to have those taxing districts present, as well as the education districts, D21, the ESD, and the Columbia Gorge Community College, to discuss those different models. We probably came up with 5, 6, 7, 8 different potential models of how to distribute those fees as a proportion of each taxing district's total levy amongst all the districts, amongst the districts that were specifically called out in the ORS as part of the decision-making process, or as even as a split percentage. 50% could go to larger community projects that we may not be able to do otherwise without these funds, 50% distributed to the taxing districts. Again, either all of the taxing districts or the taxing districts listed specifically in that ORS. So we had a lot of back and forth in those meetings, but we're unable to reach consensus. And so we had some additional meetings between the City of the Dalles, Wasco County, and the Fire District, and ultimately landing on the breakout that was included in the IGA, again, in your packet tonight. And so ultimately, that distribution was to proportionally distribute the fee amongst all of the taxing districts that levy taxes at the site, including the education districts, D21, Columbia Gorge Community College, and the ESD, for both projects 1 and 2. And if the council recalls, that was somewhat of a change at the end of our previous meeting that we had, where we had hoped to decide the distribution of the second community service fee closer to when that project actually commenced. But under the Business Oregon rules, we had to reach consensus or reach a distribution methodology for both of those fees in a timely manner. The next time the Business Oregon Commission will consider this issue will be in June, which means we need to submit documents or inform Business Oregon that we have reached an agreement, or at least are making substantive headway towards an agreement, and that signatures are pending by May 16th. And so the agreement, or the IGA that was crafted, has gone before the County Commission, the Port of the Dalles, the Library District, the Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue District. I believe I may be blanking on one more. And what was that?
The Park District?
I don't know the current status on the Parks District. My apologies. But for the entities I just listed, the IGA has passed those entities. And so I'm here at the City Council meeting tonight seeking your passage of this IGA. We will finish with the other involved parties, the other taxing districts, follow up with signatures and get the document executed, and then transmit to Business Oregon that we have reached an agreement. And so in the IGA, you will see that both of those projects are broken out, Project 1, Project 2. They are the exact same percentages in both instances, but we wanted to be absolutely clear what those breakouts would be for both Project 1 and 2. And I think as a representative currently as the county, I think that there will be an interest in revisiting this with the taxing districts down the road to see if there is interest to contributing some of those fees to some of those greater good projects. As I mentioned somewhat previously, the County Commission, when they were directing staff, were supportive of a position of a 50-50 split, where 50% would go to those greater good projects and 50% would go to some breakout of the taxing districts. And so that may be an interest going forward to make sure that we can utilize those dollars to the best of our ability. And I think with that, I'll answer any questions that you may have and turn it back to you.
I just want to point out that this agreement is consistent with what the City Council voted on originally back a couple of months ago.
And excuse me, Mayor, my apologies. You just reminded me, there is one component that is not consistent with the previous conversation, and that there will be no loan as part of this agreement to the Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue Department. Thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, that was the $750,000 that we had agreed to. Okay, questions for Mr. Cleves? Or comments?
Go ahead.
Councilor Law?
No, I'd like to go last.
Did I miss somebody?
Well, I don't think I have any questions on this, Mr. Mayor. I do have a couple of brief thoughts, if you will allow. I'd like to say compliments to you and to Matthew and to others who negotiated this. There were a number of people involved with that, obviously, and it's pretty complex, has some significant positive impact for our community. And I support the negotiated agreement. It's, in my opinion, perhaps the single most important thing we could fund as a community, as a greater good project, is a new high school. Just my personal opinion, and this agreement would go a long way toward doing that because it directs some funds towards the school district, fairly significant number of dollars. So obviously those dollars are up to the school district to allocate, but hopefully they will be aiming them that way as well. So I think it's a good agreement. I'm glad we got here. I know it was challenging, but in the end, good job. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Matthew. And thanks to others involved with this.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Long?
So that is true, that this agreement, except for the loan portion, is what the council initially voted on, and I still support that I did that. Makes sense. I have long been an advocate for dividing it evenly between all the taxing districts. I think in the past we didn't do that, and it definitely hurt some of the other agencies. I do want to say though, just personally, that well, I'll step back. I am going to support this because all of the taxing districts said that they can live with it. But personally, I was approached by several members of the other agencies and read things in the newspaper. And I just want to say that I was disappointed that this whole thing was so contentious and it was not collaborative as I would have liked. Given that all the taxing bodies involved are foregoing tax revenue that's earmarked for the services that they provide, some of which are actually going to be required at an increased level because of the building of these data centers. And that is actually something that I had not considered when we first talked about splitting the money. I also realized that the community service fee is just the first upfront portion. There's a lot more money coming after this. Even the city will be getting some money, I believe, toward infrastructure, if I understand the process correctly, that there are fees that Google's going to have to pay in addition to services, just a typical building thing. So I hope that as a community, we can step back and consider that not just the county and the city have infrastructure and additional law enforcement costs, which of course involve personnel, but also equipment for those people, but also the fire department, the Mid-Columbia Community Fire and Rescue. And that is something that I had not considered. And this is in the best interest of everyone living in the Dalles, everyone living in Wasco County, that we have adequate services throughout. And I don't think it should have been, again, my personal opinion is it shouldn't have been as contentious, because I think we could have had something more win-win. Thank you.
Councilor McLaughlin.
By working together, we stand the best chance of moving forward for a better community and a future. I do appreciate everything you did in your efforts and yours, Mayor Mays, in moving this forward. And that's what I'd like to say. Let's work together, find ways to make improvement. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? I just wanted to point out that through our efforts, District 21 is going to be getting probably a conservative estimate of $500,000 a year out of this. And maybe Mr. Klebs, you could explain the difference between taxes and fees as it regards to the state aid formula for education. I know that's a question I get a lot. What would this the $500,000 that District 21 would receive under this agreement? Would it be taken away by the state school aid formula, just like a property tax would?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, I can speak to that. So, and one of the things that I will point to is under one of our previous enterprise zone agreements, there is a annual fee where a specific amount of that fee is essentially carved out and provided to the school district, similar to this community service fee. And because those are in essence fee dollars, this is the distinction the mayor is referencing, because those are fee dollars, they are not treated in the same way as a tax dollar, which essentially becomes part of the state school-wide funding distribution formula. And so those fee dollars literally stay here with D21 as additional resources or revenues that they could use towards whatever they deem worthy. The enterprise zone agreements we've had previously, there's been a number of different things that the school district has done with those funds. And I believe the school district typically comes with a report to the city council on what they've used those for in years past.
So their amounts from the state would not be reduced by receiving this.
Correct, correct.
Being a past band director, when I saw new instruments being purchased for the district and those opportunities in the future for expanding and offering new things, that's well worth it. So.
Anybody else? I'd just like to say, and also in conclusion, I would hope that I do think it was contentious, but I do think that all the parties are involved, including the fire department, the city and the county, are ready to move forward for the betterment of the community. And I think that contentiousness is I like to think it's all over now. Anybody else? Okay, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor. I would move that we authorize the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the various public agencies for disbursement of the community service fee portion of the strategic investment program with Google LLC.
And I will go ahead and second that.
It's been moved by Councilor Richardson and seconded by Councilor McLaughlin to approve the resolution approving the intergovernmental agreement regarding distribution of the community service fee. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Cleaves.
Thank you.
Okay. City of the Dalles will now meet in an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6602F to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the meeting. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on, record, or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about these subjects during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back. There is a separate Zoom login for the executive session in the return to open session. I would also request that Mr. Cleaves and Ms. Wilson be permitted to attend our executive session. Is there any objection? Okay, thank you all very much. We'll be back in session.